Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the webinar on cybersecurity and trust building mutual trust to enhance digital economy. This event is jointly organized by Huawei and KSI Strategic Institute for Asia Pacific, aka KSI. My name is Zaim Mozani from KSI, and as always, I will be your unpaid, untrained MC for today. Cybersecurity is the practice of protecting systems, networks, and programs from digital attacks. The cyber attacks are usually aimed at accessing, changing, or destroying sensitive information, extorting money from users, or interrupting normal business processes. Implementing effective cybersecurity measures is particularly challenging today because there are many devices that people and attackers are becoming more innovative and creative. And this is why we are organizing this webinar today. I'll be calling on two esteemed speakers to deliver welcome remarks, followed by a keynote, and we will have a panel discussion where we will end it with a question and answer session. Now, to commence the proceedings of today's webinar, I would like to call on Tan Sri Michael Yeoh, President of KSI Strategic Institute for Asia Pacific, aka my boss, to deliver the welcoming remarks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mrs. Rita, Irina, Vice President of Huawei Malaysia, Mr. Fabian, Bigar, the CEO of MyDIGITAL, our distinguished speakers, and ladies and gentlemen who are following us on this webinar. It's an honor to welcome all of you to today's webinar, jointly organized by Huawei Technologies Malaysia and the KSI Strategic Institute for Asia Pacific. As our MC earlier, my colleague Zaim has said, cybersecurity challenge that we face as we continue to move forwards towards digitalization. The digital economy is rapidly growing with digital transformation taking place in many key economic sectors. We see digital transformation not only in business and technology, but also in education, in healthcare, and in many other spheres of human life. And it is critical to ensure that in the process of implementing digitalization, security is safeguarded. I think over the last 2 years, when we went through the pandemic, we have seen incidences of scams and cyber frauds being perpetuated on the public. And this shows the critical need to enhance cybersecurity. And here in today's seminar, we hope that we would be able to discuss how cybersecurity can be further enhanced and protected. Building trust in the digital economy is also a key challenge that we face, and it's also a factor that we need to take into account in order to get more people on board to participate in the digital economy. The younger generation are all so much a part of the digital society, but we need to also cater to some of the more senior folks in our countries, in our societies, who somehow or other still face some mistrust about going digital. So the challenge of building, maintaining trust in the digital economy is also another key challenge that we need to face. Here in Malaysia, the MyDIGITAL initiative will roll out many key initiatives to transform Malaysia into an advanced digital economy. We would like to hear from Mr. Fabian Bigar later on some of the plans and strategies of the MyDIGITAL initiative in Malaysia. All of our speakers for taking time off their very busy schedule to be with us this afternoon at this webinar, and we look forward also to comments from our participants who could also do so by posing questions on the chat. So welcome and a very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tan Sri Michael Yeoh, and that was a very important message on navigating through the more complex and complicated digital economy that we have today. And with that, I'm going to pass the floor to Ms. Rita Irina Abdul Wahab, Vice President of Public Affairs and Communications of Huawei Malaysia, to deliver the welcoming remarks. Rita, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Zaim. Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon to everyone. Tan Sri Michael Yeoh, Fabian Bigar, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar on Cybersecurity and Trust, Building Mutual Trust to Enhance Digital Economy. We are honored to have you joining us today. I would also like to thank KSI Strategic Institute for helping organize today's event and for all the hard work you have put into making it a success. Thank you. Trust is a fundamental value that underlies all technological innovation, and that is currently under threat. The digital economy is not a separate part of civilized society and has to be governed by the same fundamental principles that govern our daily lives. Since there is no overarching single authority that governs or polices internet communities, it is up to us, the corporate sector, business leaders, and the government to create an environment of trust that ensures the validity of the digital economy, which is why today's webinar is so timely and important. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic gave rise to an even more widespread use of the internet. With technology touching more and more aspects of daily life and work, digitalization is no longer a luxury, but a necessity. Along with the benefits this has brought, this accelerated digitalization has also placed governments, businesses, organizations, and individuals in more vulnerable positions, making them more susceptible to cyber attacks. The nature of cyber attacks have also evolved. Among the breaches or attacks, including phishing attacks, impersonations, malware, as well as ransomware. With the attacks, hackers gain access to all kinds of potentially lucrative information, such as sensitive and confidential data. It is not too far-fetched to theorize that this could lead to different types of terrorism attacks, attacks on other nations with cyber weapons, silent strikes on another country's computer systems, power grids and dams that leave no trace behind. Cybersecurity incidents are becoming more and more real. We see more countries committed to working together to combat cyber threats. Countries in the Asia-Pacific region are highly concerned about increasing security spending due to this ever-growing threat landscape. Many are beginning to realize that it is crucial to invest our time, money, and energy in cybersecurity. Cyber threats are more than just a technology issue. It is a strategic business risk that now continues to impact every facet of every organization, be it in the government or private sector. Malaysia is not isolated from this struggle. The growing number of cyber attacks have caused huge damage, leading Malaysia to adopt the best-in-class public safety and security systems. Just last year, Anonymous Malaysia claimed that several government websites were hacked as part of their Ops Wake Up 21 cyber attack in an attempt to urge the government to properly protecting the public's private data. Although it was reported that only one website was affected, this highlighted the urgent need for organizations to take up every precaution to ensure their platforms do not become compromised. Any planned or proposed attack against organizations or agencies, especially government ones, should be taken very seriously. While we explore these issues further in the webinar, we hope that more public and private partnerships will be established, which will lead to more positive actions in the global efforts to combat cyber threats. Ladies and gentlemen, according to the World Economic Forum, one important way that government and businesses can join forces in the battle for cybersecurity is to share threat intelligence. Government and companies have different sources of information, insight, and intelligence. Pulling them in a timely and strategic manner will create a clearer and more current picture of cyber threats. This can also be emulated between nations in the region to combat cyber attacks. Such initiatives are valuable, but information sharing isn't yet consistent or timely enough. The foundation of all this is trust. Governments can build trust and deepen cooperation, and this is something pertinent that we should discuss in this webinar. Without a doubt, digitalization further cements game-changing capabilities that technologies bring into the world of diplomacy among nations. New digital technologies have had and will continue to have a profound impact on both the practice and content matter of diplomacy. Malaysia's digital diplomacy strategy should unlock strategic value with regard to online diplomatic engagements. This includes optimizing the digital medium to boost diplomatic influence, mainly via building blocks with strategic partners and identifying different communication strategies in hope to minimize the impact of cyber threat. Mutually agreed international standards for security are very important to guarantee a seamless integration into the global cyberspace without compromising security or data sovereignty. No one should be left behind, and connectivity based on a secure, robust infrastructure is critical for the rakyat and businesses. This will allow consumers to enjoy cost reductions, same levels of trust in the country or while roaming, and agility in a volatile global environment. Huawei Malaysia is also playing its part in ensuring cybersecurity with the 5G Cybersecurity Lab, or My5G. The lab is a joint effort between Cybersecurity Malaysia, Celcom, and Huawei Malaysia. This was formalized via an MOU which was signed last year with the objective of understanding, learning, managing, mitigating, and reducing 5G-related cyber threats while introducing the Network Equipment Security Assurance Scheme, or NESAS, to help build a safe, resilient, and inclusive digital ecosystem in Malaysia. The 5G Cybersecurity Test Lab is the first of its kind in Southeast Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, it is in this spirit of collective action that we hope to chart a new security landscape for the country. We look forward to a fruitful exchange of knowledge today, and we thank you for your time and presence. I hope this will be a platform for all of us to actively cooperate and complement each other's strengths, promote cyber safety, and build intelligent solutions towards the enhancement of our digital economy. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Rita, for your welcoming remarks. I found that it was interesting. You touched on a number of points, starting with the rise of cyber attacks, which is displayed in the vulnerability of government websites. You spoke about the need for public-private partnerships, which is reflected in the 5G Cybersecurity Test Lab, which aims to strengthen the country's cybersecurity capability in preparation of the 5G rollout. You touch about the need to share threat intelligence, and also, interestingly, the role of technologies in promoting digital diplomacy. And you talk about the need to have connectivity across the country that leaves no one behind. So very insightful, welcoming remarks. And before I pass the floor to Mr. Fabian Bigar, the CEO of Strategic Change Management Office of MyDIGITAL of Economic Planning Unit, EPU, of the Prime Minister's Department. It's a very long title, but essentially Fabian handles the country's blueprint to bring Malaysia as the next power in digital economy in the next decade. I was reminded of things I've read in the blueprint that I thought was interesting, including two things I thought was interesting: attracting 2 unicorns. Now we have already Qasem, which is one of the 2 unicorns, and catalyzing 5,000 startups in the next 5 years. So these are interesting plans in the blueprint that will bring Malaysia to the next level as we compete with our regional neighbors in the digital economy. So with that, I'm going to pass the floor to Fabian for the keynote, opening address for this webinar. Fabian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Zain. Very good afternoon to Tan Sri Michael Yeoh, President KSI, Ms. Rita Irina Abdul Wahab, Vice President, Public Affairs and Communications, Huawei Malaysia, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, both KSI and Huawei Malaysia, for inviting me to say a few words at this event. Many of you may recall that the government of Malaysia launched the MyDIGITAL initiative sometime in February last year. This initiative complements the national development policies such as the Third Malaysia Plan and the Shared Prosperity Vision 2030. The aim of this initiative is to empower all Malaysians from all walks of life to improve their lives by improving digital literacy, creating high-income jobs, making banking or financial transactions easier and seamless, providing quality virtual education across access to our children, bringing medical facilities to remote towns, and bridging the digital divide. The strategies, specific initiatives, and targets are actually documented in the Malaysia Digital Economy Blueprint. The blueprint carries the aspiration of the government to transform Malaysia into a digitally driven, high-income nation that is a leader in the digital economy in the region. It also serves as a digital transformation direction plan to drive businesses to compete globally by improving expediency and efficiency of their operations and aim to unlock Malaysia's full potential to benefit from the digital economy. The MyDIGITAL initiative is led by the following guiding principles. Number one, inclusivity, in order to ensure that nobody is left behind, which I heard, in the speeches prior to mine, as a result of digitalization. Ethics, this is to ensure that data and digital tools are used in an ethical manner. And finally, trust, ensuring the growth of digital economy is not at the expense of personal privacy and cybersecurity. Okay, the blueprint outlines 3 objectives, 6 strategic trusts, which are supported by 32 strategies, 48 national initiatives in mouthful, right, and 28 sectoral initiatives. One of the trusts is actually to build a trusted, secure, and ethical digital environment. This is meant to ensure safety, privacy, security, reliability, and data ethics in digital services through their online programs and devices, and to instill confidence and trust in the people and businesses and government. Today, the role of technology has become incredibly pervasive, cutting across education, healthcare, financial services. There is much greater urgency for our regulatory environment to be anchored on trust and digital native policies, which reflect the world we live in today. An enabling regulatory environment is needed to build a fast-paced digital economy environment. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a quote from this PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers inaugural Digital Trust Insights Survey in 2018 that still remains true today, that the quote is, if the lifeblood of the digital economy is data, its heart is digital trust. As the entire economy moves forward, businesses and government services are now gradually moving to the digital platform. As such, threats can quickly outpace traditional approaches to data security. Hence, governments and organizations need to be proactive in creating and adapting systems to face these threats. Apart from the Personal Data Protection Act, or PDPA, that currently does not cover data collected by government, Malaysia does not have any other data privacy laws. On the contrary, several countries around the world have a privacy law that extends to government data, such as the South African Protection and Personal Information Act 2000, the Indian Personal Data Protection Bill 2019, and New Zealand Privacy Act 2020, replacing the previous one in 1993. In the Malaysia Digital Economy Blueprint, the government plans to review the PDPA. Ladies and gentlemen, the global direct monetary losses to cybercrime in 2020 were estimated to have nearly doubled to USD 945 billion from 522 billion in 2018, while spending on cybersecurity in 2020 was expected to exceed 145 billion USD, together comprising about 1.3% of the global GDP. Okay, so in Africa, I just got a number from Africa. In 2017, cybercrime cost Africa an estimated USD 3.5 billion in direct losses. Okay, these estimates exclude indirect costs to victims, such as opportunity cost, downtime, loss of efficiency, brand disparagement, loss of trust, intellectual property infringement, and damage to employee morale. They also exclude systemic costs such as supply chain impacts on upstream suppliers and downstream customers. The full economic cost of cybercrime, including direct, indirect, and upstream system costs, have been estimated at 3 times its direct costs, putting 2020 global total cost near around $4 trillion, about 4% of the global GDP. Digital Planet, MasterCard, and Tufts University Fletcher School conducted a large-scale analysis and produced a digital trust scorecard in December 2020. In the context of digital economy, they define trust as the leap of faith and the confidence that causes users to exercise a choice to interact, transact, and consume online. Fundamentally, it determines the quality of interaction between those who give trust and those who guarantee to uphold the said trust. The loss of digital trust suggests many people are worried about the role technology plays in their lives currently. This is especially relevant at a time when millions of people around the world have shifted to online learning, telemedicine, remote work, e-commerce to counter the restrictions brought about by the pandemic. A trusted environment is likely highly digitally evolved and stable. The Digital Trust Scorecard findings showed that a secure digital environment and highly trusting attitudes were associated with digital evolution and stability, as exemplified by countries such as Denmark, Austria, Sweden, and Germany. On the other hand, economies with high digital momentum tended to have less secure digital environments, and their users often have greater privacy concerns. This means that as economies ramp up their digital momentum, it is especially important for government and business leaders to take steps to address privacy and security issues that may impact users. However, the onus is not only on the regulators and the industry to determine security to foster trust in our collective digital ecosystem. Since the vast majority of digital content is user-generated, much of the security and data privacy comes from how individuals engage with these systems. Ladies and gentlemen, human beings, that means all of us, we are the weakest link in cybersecurity. So public awareness and education are essential elements of effective cybersecurity. Public or private enterprises have good reasons to provide security awareness training to employees to prevent security incidents, build a culture of security, strengthen technology defenses, instill customer confidence, ensure compliance, be socially responsible, and improve employee well-being. It is imperative to invest in building awareness of cyber risks and misinformation among users. This can take place in the form of professional workshops, data literacy courses, and even media education classes geared towards fostering good habits early on. Malaysia needs to fully leverage on the fast-growing digital economy as a key strategy for economic recovery, which means attracting more investment in digitalization. The MyDIGITAL blueprint sets the roadmap for us on our journey to achieve inclusive digital Malaysia, and we must all play our part in ensuring its successes. In gaining and ensuring trust, we must strive to foster for a digital environment that prioritizes on the trust of its users. So finally, I hope that all the participants will gain more insight during today's session. Do take this opportunity to learn and enrich your knowledge from the impressive list of speakers. Thank you once again, and have a productive session ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fabian, for the insightful opening address. I think some of the key points that you mentioned is privacy laws, the need, you mentioned about the digital trust scorecard, you talk about the need for awareness and education to achieve an inclusive digital Malaysia. The quote was interesting about from PwC on the digital trust insights, which was, if the lifeblood of digital economy is data, its heart is digital trust. It's very insightful, very interesting. Fabian will make his leave at about 3 p.m. as he has a prior engagement. So we still have 4 minutes for him to be with us. And I think with that, let me take the advantage of proceeding straight to the next panel discussion on cybersecurity and trust, building mutual trust to enhance digital economy. We'll be touching on the following aspects: the role of cybersecurity in building the digital economy, how can companies and government prepare for what is to come, how can mutual trust be built, what are the current trends addressing challenges, opportunities, and the impact of innovative technologies on digital economy. Another one is on turning to public-private partnerships, 3P, on building a vibrant and trusted digital economy. And finally, we're talking about digital ASEAN, shaping a new value-based digital economy. To unpack these questions, we have a powerful panel comprising of the following powerful individuals. We have Mr. Anwer Mohamed Yusoff, Head of Industry and Business Development from Cybersecurity Malaysia. We have Dr. Sharlene Thiagarajah, CEO of TM Research and Development. We have Mr. Chem Siriwat, Director of Center for Inclusive Digital Economy from the Asian Vision Institute from Cambodia. We have Mr. Paul Michael Stanlen, CTO, Chief Technology Officer of Carrier Network Business Group of Huawei Technologies. And to moderate this session, we're going to call back Tan Sri Michael Yeoh, President of KSI, to moderate this session. So, Tan Sri, the digital floor is yours.
Well, good to have everybody here again with us. We have, as Lion has stated earlier, 4 very distinguished panelists who will be speaking to us here this afternoon on this session. Our panelists will have about 15 minutes each to make your presentation, after which we shall have an open discussion, and then we can have the interaction during that discussion session. The first speaker this afternoon in this panel is Mr. Mohamed Yusoff, Head of Industry and Business Development in Cybersecurity Malaysia. Mohamed Anwer has more than 20 years of extensive experience in the Malaysian ICT industry, aeronautical engineering from Florida, and also done postgraduate studies, areas of artificial intelligence. Mohamed Anwer is currently the Head of Industry and Business Development and Cybersecurity Malaysia, and he believes that the cornerstone of cybersecurity is and will remain private partnership, and only by acting together. One sentence summary of his philosophy on cybersecurity. So without any further ado, may I invite Mr. Mohamed Anwer to address us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Good afternoon, Tan Sri. Good afternoon, Ms. Rita. And unfortunately, Mr. Fabian have left. So, well, as mentioned by Fabian, and this is according to PwC's inaugural Digital Trust Insight. If the lifeblood of the digital economy is data, then the heart must be digital trust. Okay, so this was mentioned in 2018, and I think this is still relevant while we are now experiencing, I guess, a global backlash against technology, and there is a reduced support for digitization. Of course, we see everybody with a smartphone now, but I guess we have to understand that there are challenges that are posed by the fourth industrial revolution, where creating and maintaining social trust are among the most central. And basically everything, all our decisions, the minute that we wake up, you walk over to the bathroom, you turn on the lights, you turn on your water heater, you get up, get into your car, driving, even getting your vaccination, sending emails, being on your mobile phone. We basically are trusting, okay? We are trusting that somebody somewhere has taken the necessary steps to make sure that those activities are safe and fair. The World Economic Forum chose a crucial year to rebuild trust as the theme for Davos in January 2021. And this was at the start of the second year of the pandemic. Yeah. So basically the forum called for rebuilding trust and strengthening international cooperation to foster innovative, bold solutions in order for the global economy to recover from the effects of the pandemic. And I think as what we can see today, the global economy is interdependent and complex. Okay, there is no single organization that can face all these challenges, be it economic, environmental, social, or technological alone. So similar dialogues and initiatives on the theme of trust have taken place recently in a variety of fields. Example of this is the Trust and Public Policy Report issued by OECD and the Data Free Flow with Trust, as well as the Paris Call. So I will allude to some of this. Hopefully I have time to explain. And I think there are also a lot of trust guidelines, especially for artificial intelligence, that has been published in various countries' reports. Okay, and I think the key thing here today is our shared foundation of trust is under strain as never before. Rapid social change and demands of disruptive new technologies are basically stretching the limits of our traditional systems for building trust. Governments, businesses, and rakyat, we are struggling to keep up. Simply put, trust is something that we can no longer take for granted. Okay, we understand that now our digital age has made it harder and it's more difficult to know who to trust, whom to trust. Okay, that person or company that we are dealing with, is it real or is it just an online facade? The video that we are looking at, that our friends send to us every morning, every afternoon, and on WhatsApp, is it genuine or is it just a deep fake? Where exactly is our MyDIGITAL data going? And I think that is the point of contention. Everybody is sensitive about that. Yeah. So there is absolutely no way we can fact check everything. And this is creating anxiety, I guess. Yeah. I think we understand that. If people can only trust what they have seen and touched, or the people that they have met personally, society is going to have a problem. We can't function. The system is under strain and we can no longer take trust and trust building for granted. Okay. When we talk about trust in the context of governance and the adequate functioning of societies, we mean the assumption of goodwill and safety that is necessary for basic human interactions. Those could be commercial transactions or cooperations to solve some kind of collective problem. Trust can, of course, be personal, trusting someone that you know. But since most people in society are strangers, okay, it is often mediated by a third party. It could be the government, it could be a company with a trusted brand, it could be Cybersecurity Malaysia, it could be anyone. Okay, so the main issues are relationships and processes that create trust in society. It's basically a chicken and egg problem. Authorities cannot govern effectively unless people trust them. But people won't trust them unless there is a proven track record of effectiveness and trustworthiness. So as such, a trust chain has got to be built link by link. Okay, and unfortunately, this task is being made more difficult by the ever-accelerating speed of technological change. Take, for example, autonomous vehicle. Of course, they need a track record of safety before they can be considered truly trustworthy. But the technology, and I think Rita have put that very well, 5G is coming in, is advancing so quickly that probably self-driving cars are going to be on the road before we have respective laws or processes of autonomous vehicles. Hence, the loss of digital trust suggests that, of course, many people are worried what is the technology role in our daily lives. Okay, this is especially relevant now when millions of people around the world have shifted to online learning, telemedicine, remote work, and e-commerce because of the pandemic. Okay, PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers 2021 Trust Survey acknowledges this digital conscience. Okay, Sean Joyce, the company's global leader for cyber, privacy, and forensics, acknowledges that what the pandemic has resulted in drastic changes are that things that we thought of the future are now being adopted. So this is basically a concern, okay? So viewed from this perspective, unfortunately, the mistrust in technology threatens to prevent an open global collaboration that makes innovation possible. So to counter this threat, public and private partners must rally not only to secure systems and data, but also to protect and uphold the technology integrity of new innovations. Because values that people hold dear, such as privacy and the right for self-determination, are not undermined, okay? So establishing objective facts or conditions, or what we call as trustworthiness, that show that governance is balancing the expansion of human potential through technology with the protection of important values, is actually the first step towards dispelling this mistrust, okay? This is, of course, difficult to achieve using existing governance methods alone. So it is essential that we conduct governance processes in an agile manner where we have the participation of multiple stakeholders, okay? Many of the complex issues that are brought about today by digital technologies does not have simple answers, okay? Social media, for example. And all this, we need to reflect upon the values of the societies. How are we going to be using social media for governance in politics, for example? The involvement of citizens will be important at this process, and innovation in this area is definitely required. While at the same time, it is definitely necessary to communicate carefully with the citizens, with the rakyat, what trustworthiness are going to be built through governance, hence to strive to earn their trust, okay? This is an agile and a fragile process. It is necessary to change the mindset of each entity, organizations, agencies, as well as rakyat, so that we can implement a mechanism to enable the operation of the processes. We have to nurture new capabilities in business and governance entities, because to keep the chain of trust intact, trust anchors must be built for this present fourth industrial revolution through mutual cooperation, okay? I would like to propose that the trust governance framework that is built by WEF under the white paper, Rebuilding Trust and Governance Towards Data Free Flow, which abbreviated by DFFT, probably can help to realize the vision of a society that transcends national and disciplinary barriers, where everyone, we can work together, because it is very important that trust is hard to earn, but very easily lost, okay? So with that, I end my 10 minutes speech, I guess, and hand over back to Tan Sri. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anwar, for sharing your perspective. You have shared some very important points, starting with the need to strengthen international cooperation, and you quoted from the World Economic Forum. I think you made a very interesting observation that we need to discuss who to trust and whom to trust. And I think these are important questions. You've also said that trust must be built link by link, and you've highlighted the importance of governance, integrity, and innovation in building trust. So thank you for those remarks. Our next speaker is Dr. Sharlene Thiagarajah, the CEO of TN Research and Development. Welcome here, Dr. Charlene. Dr. Charlene is responsible for bringing new technology and innovation to the Telecom Malaysia Group, with special focus on advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, IOI, and digital platforms. She has more than 25 years of experience in the telecommunications industry. She holds a PhD in computer systems engineering, a master's in telecommunications engineering, as well as a bachelor's degree with first-class honors in electrical engineering. Charlene is also on the board of AXA Affin General Insurance and adjunct professor in University Technology, Malaysia. So welcome here. We'd like to hear now from Dr. Charlene. Over to you.
Thank you, Tan Sri, for the kind introduction. First of all, I'd like to thank KSI and Huawei Malaysia for inviting me to this panel. It is indeed an honor to be here. In line with the topic of today's discussion, I would like to give my views on the topic of building trust, mutual trust to enhance the digital economy, with a key focus on sustainable digital economy, not just for Malaysia, but for a global ecosystem. Next slide, please. Before I go further, allow me a quick introduction to TM R&D, our business. And this is purely to give context about my approach and perspective when I give my views today. TM R&D is a wholly owned subsidiary of Telekom Malaysia. We were incorporated in 2001, and today we are located in the Silicon Valley of Malaysia, that is Cyberjaya. So we are an R&D company owned by a telco. So as an organization, we are not an operator, but we build smarter digital solutions for telco, and we also sell these solutions to the external market. Next slide, please. So our strength is in connectivity and digital services, and I must thank my team for an incredible run so far, for we have developed many solutions for TM, but always with a global market or global mindset in mind. So since 2016, we have commercialized 18 solutions, and today we are running at a 24% revenue growth CAGR, and 3 of our products have been exported to the Asean region. Now, I do realize that we have Huawei in the room, so bear with me on my narratives here. So out of the 18 solutions that we have built from scratch, 7 of them are mission critical systems that we have built for TM. They span from workforce management to fleet operations to contact center applications to improve productivity and reducing average call handle times, all the way up to network prediction algorithms to predict when and where a network faults exist or will occur, up to 30 days in advance. So next. So when we started our journey on digital and commercialization in 2016, 2 of our biggest pain points was building high quality, reliable software that is faster, cheaper, better, and so on. And of course, the next step was how do we maintain these platforms, faster, cheaper, and so on. So, and our vision has always been to build everything digital first. Cloud-based with AI and machine learning and all the other IR 4.0 technologies embedded in it where required. So with that vision in mind, we built Centurion, and this is to align to the topic of cybersecurity. So we built Centurion, which was a code level security scanning tool for TM R&D, purely for internal use. And today I'm happy to share that it is a security compliant requirement for TM, that any software built within TM needs to go through this security code scanning tool, as well as any software that's purchased by TM needs to be scanned by Centurion. And we have decided to launch this product sometime this year when we actually built it for internal use, because we believe that system integrators, software houses, or any enterprises that are embracing digitalization will find the benefit of a code level scan, especially when it's, software is being built. So it is very beneficial to have a code level security scan to catch bugs and vulnerabilities as the software is being built. And this is a key element that we are focusing on. Because in the past, and I'm speaking purely from my organization perspective, it was very expensive for us to do security scans because the scanning tools and softwares were always run by third-party security companies. So developers tend to run the security test right at the end when the entire project is completed and the entire software piece has been built. So when we do this right at the end, and when we find vulnerabilities in the codes, there's a massive rework on the codes that needs to be done. And because we're trying to build security into the codes and not just build security as a wrapper outside the software after it's built. And I think business owners will understand this. So due to strict timelines, sometimes even when security vulnerabilities are found, product owners still make that business call to deploy the software anyway, with the intention of fixing it as it goes, as after it's deployed. It's risky, but it happens. So we are a big advocate at TMR&D to continuously do code level scanning, and this is during development to catch early vulnerabilities and fix it, right? And this is really to reduce the wastage in resources and time and cost to actually do the rework after the codes have been, done. And so we also wanted to infuse security as a very important lever during code development and not an afterthought, which used to be the premise, many, many years ago. So next slide, please. So how do we shape a new value-based digital economy? And to me, I'll add that is robust and that is inclusive and that is sustainable. So this is my 2 cents here. I've got 4 major building blocks that I believe are key to bring the entire ecosystem partners together to make this work. And I've got 3 of them articulated here, and I'll talk to them, and I'll talk about the 4th one later. So the first 3 is technology, business models, and mindset. Now, technology stack is the easiest to align and fix, but the business models and the mindsets are where a major shift is required. And to me, to create a new business model that is win-win for all ecosystem partners is where a massive collaboration mindset needs to occur, where it can no longer be winner takes all or a zero-sum game. But this is easier said than done. Yeah. But seriously, what this boils down to is, if our intention is for a long-term solution, which is a sustainable digital economy, then this is what mutual trust means. Building a global economy that is sustainable and win-win for all businesses and nations. Now, I've left the fourth building block empty, and next on the next click, please. The 4th building block that I would like to talk about is ecology. Now, I've added this to my narrative at every technology conference. Now, it may look out of place, but because I believe there will be no economy, and especially no digital economy, if all life on this planet ceased to exist over the next 60 or 100 years. Now, I'm going to quote Sadhguru here, where this is not a doomsday prediction, but it's kind of like a wake-up call. Next slide, please. So I look at ecology as the missing link between growing the digital economy while ensuring a sustainable and a living planet. I'll be sharing a video next that shows an interview between Sadhguru and Trevor Noah, 2 very influential people on the planet. And I was very impressed that Trevor is using this platform to spread the word on the importance of saving soil for human survival. Now, take a listen. This is my last slide. Thank you for listening. And if you want to find out more about the work we do, please visit our website. It's here on the on the page, www.tmrnd.com.my. But most importantly, if you're a corporation looking for an ESG initiative, look no further. Now, I see a lot of corporations focusing on reducing carbon emissions as their ESG initiative, a net zero sum initiative, but we could stand out as industry leaders, and I was hoping Fabian would be here as well. by changing the narrative on agriculture land, because it's always been linked with deforestation, which is, you know, what needs to happen for agriculture land to be in place. So to change that narrative from deforestation to agriculture land being able to trap carbon in soil. Now, this is the missing link in climate change. And we always had reducing carbon emissions, which is excellent and needs to continue, but also converting carbon that is already in the air, CO2 and so on, into healthy organic matter in soil. So to sum up, the impact of Safe Soils is inclusive, and it's part of, you know, the entire ecosystem of, you know, a digital economy. It has far-reaching implications beyond just climate change. It's the missing link between making agriculture or farming as a business sustainable. It promotes food security, increases nutrition in food. You know, a better nutrition in food means a healthier population. And if agriculture becomes a more bankable industry and a greener industry, it's potentially a big win for, you know, Bank Negara as well as the securities commissions and businesses in general. So with that, I leave you with that thought. Over to you, Tan Sri. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharlene. It was an interesting clip that you have shared with us. Give us a lot of food for thought to think about sustainability in the environment. You have also shared earlier about how important it is for TM research and development to build high quality and reliable software. You've shared your experience at Centurion, and you have also spoken and highlighted the value-based digital economy. I think we have to bear that in mind, and your 4 key factors and technology, on the business model, on ecology, and I can't read my own writing, your third one. Yeah.
Mindset.
Mindset, that's right. Yes. I think those are key points, I think. Thank you so much for that sharing. We now come to our next speaker, Mr. Cham Sriwat, who joins us from Cambodia. It was important for us to have a Cambodian speaker at today's webinar because Cambodia is the current chairman of Asean for this year. Mr. Cham Sriwat is director of the Center for Inclusive Digital Economy at the Asian Vision Institute in Cambodia. We work very closely with your institute for a long time, with your president and your chairman. And you have also been a digital business consultant at the Phnom Penh Commercial Bank, a visiting professor at the Kirirom Institute of Technology. And very interestingly, you are also one of the exclusive members of the very exclusive club of the Global Shapers community of the World Economic Forum. So good to have you here. Just to mention also that Sriwat holds a Master in Digital Technology Management, specializing in artificial intelligence from the University of Bologna in Italy. So without any further ado, I hand the floor over to you, Dr. Sriwat.
Very good afternoon, Tan Sri, distinguished guests, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome from Phnom Penh in Cambodia. It's a great honor and pleasure for me today to be part of the distinguished panel. I can see that I am indeed the only panelist outside of Malaysia coming from Cambodia. So again, it's a great honor. I strongly believe that Cambodia's presence in the digital era and cyberspace is often underrepresented and overshadowed. So today my goal will be simple: to provide a current overview of Cambodia's digital economy and cybersecurity status. So just to add on to what Tan Sri has mentioned before, I'm currently the director of the Center for Inclusive Digital Economy at AVI, which is a think tank focusing on policy research. We also implement some training programs on capacity building related to digital. Aside from that, yes, for the last few years, I was with a Phnom Penh Commercial Bank, which is a commercial bank here in Phnom Penh in the private sector, focusing on digital business. But since then, I have left, and then now I'm joining the Council for the Development of Cambodia, which is the investment promotion agency here in Cambodia, coordinating foreign direct investment. Aside from that, I'm currently an advisor at the Cambodia University of Technology and Science, focusing on science, technology, innovation, and digital technology. And so with all of those combined, I would like to provide sort of a well-rounded perspective from the nonprofit and non-government side, from the public, from the private, and from academia overall on how Cambodia's current situation is related to the digital era and in cyberspace. So just to elaborate a little bit more on the Center for Inclusive Digital Economy, in the last 3 years since our establishment, we have grown significantly as a team in terms of advisors and research fellows coming from many diverse interdisciplinary backgrounds in academia, from the technical side, IT, computer science, computer engineering, but also from the non-technical side, so more on the social science. What we try to do is conduct research and implement and publish papers and articles which bring together both sides to see really in the big picture from the policy perspective how the digital economy is evolving here in Cambodia. So moving on from that, I do have a very personal story that I would like to share, and again to thank the organizers here today, KSI, and also Huawei Malaysia. So back in 2018, I was working in Shenzhen for about a year. I was at the Southern University of Science and Technology based in Shenzhen, China, and through that connection and through my work there, I was able to visit the Huawei headquarters. And it was actually at the Huawei headquarters at the exhibition that I saw with my own eyes really the amazing progression of technology, how AI and 5G is being used. And I would say that for myself at a personal level, that was my inspiration to pursue my studies, my career, all in this field of digital technology. Another interesting point that connects me back to Shenzhen is that this was about 4 or 5 years ago that I went to a market and I tried to buy some fruit from this old lady. And then what I realized was that actually, you know, without having the ability to make digital payments through your mobile phone on WeChat, it is quite difficult. And so I offered this old auntie or grandma some cash money, and she didn't accept it. And so that just completely changed my world, that instead she just pointed to the QR code behind her just to purchase, you know, a stick with 3 pieces of pineapple on it. And I'll never forget that moment, that it shows the evolution of technology and really how one country, or starting from one city or technological hub, can expand out to the rest of the world. And so from that time, which had been 4 years ago, I was always thinking to myself, you know, Cambodia is a rapidly developing country, but when would we reach that stage of technology adoption? And in my mind, back in 2018, I was thinking at least 10 years, or maybe even 15 or 20 years. But I'm proud to say that today, when I look around, going to the market and I see these food carts along the road, they all have their own QR codes accepting mobile payments. So it just shows the speed and technology evolution here, advancement in Cambodia. So moving on to give a more general overview and perspective of the digital economy and cyberspace here in Cambodia. Currently, the population of Cambodia is around 16 to 7 million. The median age in Cambodia is around 27, with more than 2/3 of the population, around 70%, under the age of 30. So it shows that Cambodia does indeed have a very young population. Therefore, for the most part, our population is quite tech savvy. It's truly remarkable, you know, having lived in North America and Europe and Singapore, China, all these more technology advanced countries, that in a place like Cambodia with such a large state, for such a late start, you know, for many different reasons, we were still able to, let's say, catch up or leapfrog in our own way. And we see that today, for the last about 20 years, up until the COVID-19 pandemic, the GDP growth annually had been 7% for around 20 years. So in terms of economic development, there's no question that Cambodia is moving very quickly. I think a lot of that can be owed to the foreign direct investment, to the international and regional partnerships that we have. Just to give you an example, you know, Malaysia has played a huge part here in Cambodia with 2 of the biggest tech giants here in Cambodia in terms of their local subsidiaries or counterparts. One of them is Smart Axiata, coming from the Axiata group in Malaysia. Smart is one of the biggest telecom groups here in Cambodia, not only for consumers to use their telecom services on an everyday basis, but also a lot of digital initiatives coming from their side, supporting the tech startup ecosystem. So we are very grateful for that. The second would be Grab, also very popular here in Cambodia. I would say that Grab, along with competition with another local company, they do take up the market for taxi sharing, car hailing applications. So those are just two examples. From a more general perspective, in terms of digital adoption, as I mentioned, the first factor driving that is the very young population, being tech savvy, being born into the digital age. For the most part, many of the Cambodian population are able to navigate on digital applications and platforms. We use many different applications and popular platforms such as Facebook for social media. Facebook here is used religiously. Sometimes it's even overly used, I would say. I know a lot of young people that use Facebook for a search engine, even before they decide to use Google. So of course, this does have pros and cons. The pros is, the showcasing of how connected we are through social media, but of course the cons in terms of fake news, misinformation, and so on. But I believe that this will be corrected in the coming years with more digital literacy and awareness. Another very popular social media app here is Telegram, or more of a messenger app. We use that for our everyday life, communication, e-commerce, in work. A lot of times we establish groups and Telegram group chats to conduct our everyday operations. So it's just a lot of movement in terms of the digital and cyberspace. The next point I would like to talk about is more on financial technology and payments, as I gave the example of Shenzhen and Huawei before, WeChat and so on, that in the last 2 years, accelerated by the pandemic, it was clear that we had to move away from some of our more traditional practices. To give you a very simple example, maybe 3-4 years ago, if you were to take a tuk-tuk, a taxi, if you were paid to food at a restaurant, it's always in cash. Cambodia is quite unique. We are a dollarized economy, meaning that we do use USD for the most part, and also our local currency for more smaller change in the majority. But now we see the emergence of fintech applications, mobile payments and transfers, and almost, I would say most places within the capital city of Phnom Penh use mobile payments, QR, and so on. So it is really bringing together all the banks, looking into consideration of how we can bring all of this together onto one platform. Onto more of the policy and legal perspective, there is a lot of signs of progression. Currently in Cambodia, at the governmental level, there are new draft laws that are in progress in terms of legislation. The first of which is the cybersecurity law, and second is the personal data protection law. So Cambodia is showing very serious considerations towards building a robust ecosystem in terms of policy, in terms of rules and regulations from the legal perspective. I believe that it's great in terms of the digital economy that the citizens, the individuals, the consumers are all hopping on very quickly in terms of high digital adoption of using these platforms for everyday operations and transactions. But of course, I think from the higher level, we do have to protect our citizens in that regard. So I think that studying our regional partners and friends from around Asean and around the world to really take the best practices and see how we can contextualize that here in Cambodia. And finally, just another one example I would like to share is the Camdx Platform, which is standing for Cambodia Data Exchange. It's an online platform that is very new in its stage, but it does strive towards bringing together a public and private data exchange platform. So I think that this shows a bright future for Cambodia, where indeed all of our sectors, all of our practices are moving towards digitalization, towards a digital economy and society. But we do have to play our part in creating the correct and supportive regulations in place to really protect all of our citizens. So I think with all of that being said, back to the main point of this webinar on how to improve positive engagement, also building mutual trust between businesses, companies, and governments. I think from the Cambodian standpoint, it is moving forward. We have a very, let's say, positive impression and perspective on where Cambodia is moving into the future. And again, today for myself, to be part of this webinar, I would love to hear more of the best practices from your respective institutions and organizations, and be able to share that with our networks here. So for now, that's all I have to share. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to share about Cambodia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sriwat, for sharing your perspectives and insights from Cambodia. I think you have highlighted a very important key success factor for Cambodia in the digital economy, that you have a young and tech-savvy population. I think that is something that you can build on and to grow and to transform Cambodia into a rapidly growing digital society and digital economy. You have also spoken about how things are evolving very quickly in the fintech and mobile payment space, besides the traditional telecommunications and mobility applications like Axiata and Grab. But I think what is perhaps key and important for Cambodia this year as a chair of ASEAN, you can perhaps take a very major role in shaping the future of the Digital ASEAN initiative. And we hope that when the AEM, the ASEAN Economic Ministers, meet in Cambodia later in August, this Digital ASEAN initiative can be pushed forward further under your Cambodia chairmanship of ASEAN. Your Minister of Commerce, Peng Srasa, is also a very old friend of ours, and we'll be communicating with him further on how Cambodia can take the lead in Digital ASEAN. So thank you very much for joining us here this afternoon, and we wish you all the very best. Our next and final speaker for the webinar this afternoon is Mr. Paul Michael Stanlen, the Chief Technology Officer for Carrier Network Business Group of the Huawei Technologies Limited. So we are delighted to have Paul joining us. Paul has more than 30 years experience in the telecoms and IT industries and possess experience across most technologies, having worked in a variety of senior capacities across the technical, commercial, company, and business operations aspects, as well as in program management and R&D disciplines. He is an expert in the business of telecommunications, managing all aspects of telecommunications carrier and in service provider business. So Paul has also worked in many countries in Asia Pacific, Africa, North America, and Europe. So over to you, Paul.
Ansri, thank you very much. Yes, since you've given me the thumbs up, Dr. Charlene, I think it's been a long time since we last met, and how refreshing it is to see PM talking about in R&D, talking about ecology and saving the planet, dear to my heart. So in fact, Ansri, I've actually lived and worked in 120 countries globally here. And when Rita invited me to speak here this afternoon, perhaps some of you already know, but my family is actually Malaysian. So it's actually wonderful to come back to Malaysia, especially now that the doors are open. However, in the last 2 years since the pandemic started, I've actually still continued to travel, and I've spent 22 weeks in quarantine in various countries. Yeah, but anyhow, so I didn't script anything. I decided to have a listen to what everybody was saying and just pick up on a whole bunch of different things. But we're here to talk about trust, yes, and just listening to some of the speakers and where things are going. But just think about this. In the last 2 or 3 years, we've only been talking about 3 things, right? We've been talking about cybersecurity, yep. Perhaps for the wrong reason, right? Or the focus because of geopolitics on Huawei, etc. But cybersecurity, which is terribly important. But the second thing we've been talking about is, of course, health, and that's because of the pandemic. And the third one is about climate action. So they're the 3 things that have been on everybody's mind, yes? And as I travel around the world, my job is actually to engage with heads of state, kings, queens. I have dinner in most of the palaces and a lot of the prime ministers and presidents around the world. And that's really to talk about one thing, and that's trust, yes? And I don't mean to talk about why you can trust Huawei or whatever. It's about the topic that you've put up on the top there, which is about enhancing the digital economy, yes? So I just share you a simple anecdote, yeah? If I look at those countries that have mutual trust agreements, and Just have a look at how their economies grow. Just have a look at whose economy has been growing during the pandemic. That's not a lot of countries, right? It's very few, in fact. Just now, you mentioned 4 years ago that you visited Shenzhen. I actually am based in Shenzhen. So for the last 9 or 10 years, I've been there, and about 14 years in Huawei. And you're quite right. I live in a city where for 5 or 6 years, all the buses are electric. Anything on 2 wheels is electric. Yeah? All the taxis are electric. We don't use cash, credit card, debit cards. Just think about those components, right? Everybody crossing the street pays attention to the traffic lights. Pretty remarkable, right? During the pandemic, I have seen how the citizens there follow the rules for washing hands, courtesy, behavioral changes, just in a few years, yes? And this is about trusting, just as I think Mohamed mentioned, you know, how do we trust? Who do we trust? He mentioned about relationships. You can't have a relationship without trust, right? Doesn't exist. And what's trust really about? Trust is about doing what you said you would do for somebody else. Yeah. So I can remember I had the pleasure of meeting Ivan Duque, still the current president of Colombia, and in Shanghai, and then he invited me to Bogota and then to Cartagena. And during the opening address, he was sitting next to me, and I'm actually on behalf of Chinese government sitting there as a foreigner. And I started to talk about trust, and he said, Paul, I trust you. I trust Huawei. I need your help to transform my country. Yes. So we travel to countries like that in Saudi Arabia and Thailand. And we discuss at the highest level and through engagements across all industries, about examples of how you can transform the economy, transform industries to drive the economy, and this thing called digital. Just imagine for a moment, you mentioned MasterCard, yes, or Visa card, it doesn't matter which one. We still sign our names on the back of them, right? We still sign our name, right? That's a waste of time, quite frankly, right? Those things are just absolutely unnecessary. We have biometrics for a lot of things. I'm sure, Tan Sri, for sure you remember, we all have these yellow vaccination cards. Yes. They've been accepted for as long as I've been traveling. I started traveling in 1981. Actually, my number of years is more than 40 in the telecom industry. I'm showing my age. Perhaps the camera is very kind to me. But we all had vaccination cards there. I don't remember reading which brand of vaccination I had to or didn't have to use, yes. I don't recall that, yes. Or when I go for an injection for when I was a child for MMRs, whether it comes from country A or country B or country C, yes? Or listening to the BBC saying, country A is vaccine, and can we trust it? Oh, my goodness, you know. Trust, trust, trust. It's all around us, right? It's terrible how this thing of geopolitics has really changed the world. It's become very, very racist, in fact. But I think what Rita said, she says, trust is a fundamental value, right? A fundamental value. Okay. And Dr. Charlene, you just mentioned about Centurion, your software code, yes? I chair a committee in Huawei, which is responsible for in excess of $2 billion in R&D to transform the engineering capability of our software. Not because NCSC years ago or other people started saying, oh, your software has this and that. I don't think you've seen a single report in the world from a government that said we have a back door. Not one. And I check the software, and I'm responsible for demonstrating to any country, any administration who really would like to have a look at it, where we can show you the binary and the source code are 100% identical. 100% identical. I can show you from the requirements every single step and process through to the software burnt on a chip and installed in a telecom network or in an enterprise or in a consumer product. that it's not been tampered with, and that it cannot be tampered with. Yes. We have this capability today. Yes. So my job is to go around the world and to share examples of transformation, examples of what we've been doing. Countries like China. I'll just give you an example. You mentioned the neighbor across the road here. You mentioned competition in the digital economy. Let's take Thailand. Thailand will have 20 hospitals, all using 5G and AI. Yeah? All 5 manufacturers of vehicles will be using 5G, AI. Economic Development Corridor will be using 5G and AI. Yes. In China, in 1 year, 1,800 hospitals are using 5G and AI. 15,000 industries have transformed. When I visit Europe, a little bit of sleep. When I visit all the Middle Eastern countries, and just now you mentioned about Africa, they're desperate in wanting to know how to do things. I can still remember a minister standing up and saying, we just need help to write the right regulatory policy to show us how to do things. Can we leapfrog that technology? Do we have to do it step by step? Do we have to use these legacies? Yes. This is what I hear around the world. And the bottom line is, if you want to transform, if you want to grow an economy, if you want to transform industries, you need 3 things. And the first one is education. And the second one is collaboration. And the third one is trust. And why did I start with education? Just as former speakers mentioned, there's a lot of misinformation around there, a lot of disinformation, but there's just lack of consistent information that would allow people to make the right decisions. Yes. And then if we have that, it's not up to just Huawei or just the government or just an R&D company or just a telecom company. We need collaboration across a multitude of players. When just now when we talked about trust and different components, what happened? You mentioned about Google, yes? What happens with Google? Yes, as soon as you download an application, what does it say? Can I steal your data? Doesn't matter whether it's a Google, an Android, or Apple, or anybody else's operating system. No, it says, it doesn't say in those words. It just says, I need access to all your files, your contacts, and everything, right? And we say, sure. Why? Because it's free. We have Wi-Fi networks. Let me think, what's the password? There's probably none. Might be 4 zeros. Might be a little more complicated, starting with 1 and ending in 4. But, example, yes? So education, it starts with ourselves, doesn't it? Trust starts with understanding and then collaborating together. That's how we can drive things forward. But we can't do it if we can't trust one another. And Charlene, if we want to change the planet, and I'm passionate about that, or we want to fix healthcare, we can't do it alone. We need technologies. We need to collaborate. We can't isolate. That does not work. Now, that does not work. There's a lot of great information out there, but again, it's very hard to put it together to help governments drive the right policies to enable things. Even I go around the world and I say, do we want a minister for regulation or a minister for innovation? Minister for regulation or minister for enablement? As examples. So these are the sorts of things that I wanted to share with you. And I am delighted to share the fact that, as we're coming down to mutual trust, that Huawei and more than 20, perhaps almost 30 countries around the world have signed agreements where we're going to intrinsically trust one another, that there will be no back doors, that we will collaborate to help improve the country. Because I think that's fundamental for why we're here on the planet. Yes. To grow the planet, not destroy the planet. Thank you. Thank you, Tan Sri.
Thank you very much, Paul, for the very inspiring presentation on building trust. I think that's a key factor. We need to build a better world, and you have highlighted that so very importantly. and you've also shared your key success factors in building trust, and that is focusing on education, collaboration, and building mutual trust. You have also shared with us the progress that China has made in 5G, and that building mutual trust is the way forward for us to grow the digital economy. Unfortunately, I think the world today globally is facing a trust deficit. We don't trust governments, we don't trust technology, we don't even trust destinations that we all have to go through these days. So being able to build mutual trust, I think, is key to getting us forward to build a better, more sustainable, progressive world. So thank you, Paul, and thank you to all our speakers for sharing your thoughts. We now have some time for some questions and discussions. There are several questions that have been forwarded to me. I'd like to perhaps ask our speakers to respond to this question. I think the first question that I would like to put forward is what we have been talking about the whole afternoon, and that is the whole question of building trust. Digital technologies are the basis for the development of the digital economy. How do we build trust in digital technologies among governments, enterprises, and other players in the whole chain? Perhaps Dr. Charlene, you want to answer this question first?
Thank you, Tan Sri. I did speak a little bit about it in my presentation, but my position is still the same. It's a great question and an important one. So my 2 cents is really the 4 building blocks, to build a sustainable digital global economy: technology, business models, mindset. And I think the trust mindset is what everyone is circling around with, a collaborative trust mindset. And of course, my final piece, ecology. So technology is the easiest to align and fix. And I think everyone here is, highly in the technology space, and you would agree with me. The most challenging one is to build a collaborative and a win-win mindset. And that is where trust comes in. I think you mentioned it so many times. So I think we have heard of many companies wanting global domination, world domination, and I think this cannot be the goal. Because if this is the goal, we can never build trust. So, and I also like to add, and this is my passion, and I'm so happy to see Paul here, because we've gone back a long way, first meeting him in Barcelona, watching him speak and share his vision, and it's a pleasure to see him here again. So, and the second piece is really for an end-to-end digital economy to work, government and large corporations must have a larger end-to-end ecosystem in place. And I think Paul's touched upon it: nurturing talents, building infrastructure. And it's this entire piece that circles around enabling digital to foster and grow. And it includes ecology and growing food, the most fundamental, nourishment for the body.
Sorry, Charlene, I think we are off the topic. I have to add in on that. I think our forum here is digital economy. We are looking at cybersecurity and trust. I fully respect the presentation that you have given on saving the soil, but I think there are important points that we'd like to discuss here. And I would like to share that that there is this organization called Paris Call. Okay, now Paris Call was started in 2018 by President Macron, and there are 9 principles on Paris Call. Okay, allow me to share these 9 principles. All right, the first and foremost is, when we are looking into cyberspace, we look into protection of individuals and infrastructure. Okay, how are we going to prevent and recover from malicious cyber activities that threaten or cause significant, indiscriminate, or systemic harm to individuals and critical infrastructure? So that is principle number 1. Okay, and principle number 2 would be to protect the internet. I think I'm not going to run through all the 9 principles, but I guess with all due respect, Charlene, saving the soil is important, but the platform that we have here now is on cybersecurity and digital economy. And I think we would like to keep to that topic first, with all due respect.
Thank you very much to both Charlene and Anwer, but Sharlene, I think, has mentioned it very clearly that there is a need for a collaborative mindset to build trust. And I think here you are talking also about building digital trust. So the collaborative mindset that you've highlighted, you've also mentioned ecosystems, having the right ecosystem, I think is also important. And I think, Anwer, you've shared the Paris 9 principles.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can all go and do further
Unfortunately,
research, getting more information.
There are 81 countries that are part of the Paris Call, and Malaysia is not part of it. And I think this is something that we need to pick up and understand why Malaysia is not part of the Paris Call. Cambodia is part of it. Why is Malaysia not part of Paris Call? And it is all about
maybe that's something that we need to push for to get the government to look at that.
And maybe this is the forum that Tan Sri we can use, to prepare the documents, to prepare our papers that we need to bring forward why Malaysia should be part of Paris Call.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, very good point. Would Paul or Surya want to add to this question on building digital trust? Any comments on both of you?
Okay, I'll jump in very quickly. I'll just add a couple of components. One is what we've seen in trying to build trust very specifically. I'll talk about the technology component. Yeah, let's sort of come back to this particular focus. And the reason for that is, I'll just make it very simple. Standards, okay? One of the things we've done with things like 5G and before that all the others, but in many technology components is using the standards groups, the standards bodies, not associations, but standards groups to define very clearly components, yes? Because with standards, you can then start to have a process of, I'll say, enforcement, yes? And linked to that is, of course, the process and governance models. And I think some of those things have not necessarily been implemented in the past, yes? So when we develop things like 5G moving forward.
Taking on what you have said here, could I perhaps move to the next question, which I think is very relevant for you to comment on, and that's how important is globally certified cybersecurity standards for the development of the digital economy, and what perhaps can be some of these standards that you can suggest?
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Tan Sri. So that's very specific, very specifically come down to the point that I wanted to mention. Examples of NISAS and SCAS, these two examples, the work that companies like GSMA have been doing, there's a whole host of them, all starting with things like even GDPR, etc. The point is there are a lot of these that do exist, right? And you need the right certification bodies and audit companies following a governance model, no governance structure, nothing will happen, of course. And I think that comes back now to the component I mentioned, which is education. If we can show governments and administrations that there are robust models, processes, companies, and standards, then we are able to at least start these components, yes? And maybe the example of MasterCard is a good or isn't a good one, but the point is, when there is no credit card, there is no credit card fraud, right? If there's no cash, there's no stolen cash. If you get, and you can move the whole thing down to cryptocurrencies as well, right? It doesn't really matter where those components. The other thing I'd like to highlight, just sort of coming back to what Mohamed, you were saying about cybersecurity very specifically, the word cyber network. When I visit a lot of the telecom organizations, and some of them in the US, they have some, just as an example, they have some very, very sophisticated AI-based algorithms, yes? They know precisely what's coming in and out of the networks, yeah? These sorts of examples of showing other countries, other companies, other administrations, how to do some of these things. I think that was one of the examples that was quoted in one of the previous speakers. I think that's terribly important as well, to broaden this. And it's not just about the standard or the process, but to show how it's been done effectively and how we can copy it with confidence.
If I can interject here as well. Incidentally, just received this document on the framework of cooperation in digital economy between Malaysia and Singapore. And it is interesting to say that part of the scope of collaboration, cooperation includes trade facilitation. How do we endeavor to adopt the United Nations Commission of International Trade Law model on electronic transferable records, data, support the cross-border data flows. So if we are looking at how are we going to look into standards, we need to look into all these aspects. How do we facilitate the trade? How do we support cross-border data flow? How are we going to look at electronic payment? What standards are we going to use for electronic payment? Digital identities. What digital identities are we going to be looking at? Of course, finally, on the business and consumer trust. And this I find very interesting. Using existing collaboration mechanisms to cooperate on cybersecurity. Okay, what are existing collaboration mechanisms? Okay, so this to me, I think, are the ideas that we need to discuss. How are we going to look into the framework of ASEAN digital economy? All right. I understand, Paul, we do have standards for 5G NISAs. We have our fundamental ISO 27001, ISMS, common criteria for product certifications as well.
Yes.
So I guess, Tan Sri, standards are definitely important. We need standards, and also we need to look into the compliance. Who are the entities that are going to be looking into all these aspects? That is very important. And there is this common phrase that people always talk about. Amateurs, they like to talk about strategies. They like to talk about tactics. But when it comes to professionals, it is all about logistics. It's all about the details. What are the details that are we going to do? What standards are we going to impose on our industries or on our rakyat? How are we going to move around with the pandemic? You know, okay, hopefully now we can move from Singapore to Malaysia, eventually maybe even Indonesia. So these are the details that we need to look into, Tan Sri. It is not something that can be done overnight. And
I want to ask you, Anwer, when we talk about setting standards and all that, do you think we should straight away jump into setting global standards, or should regionally ASEAN come together first to develop some regional standards? How do you see the progression of standard setting?
Okay, Tan Sri, my experience in cybersecurity, we definitely look into international standards, ISO. When it comes to common criteria, which is product certification, is ISO 15408. But we do understand that if we are going to impose
Mohamed, you're frozen.
on EAL,
We've lost you.
level, the EAL2, it costs about 300,000. It is very expensive. EAL4, where we do into the source code testing and everything, it can be up to even 800,000 to 1 million ringgit. So what we have done is we have taken the methodology and simplified it. And we call it our Malaysian cybersecurity standards. We call it TSA, Technical Services, Technical Standard Assurance. So yes, we can adopt international standards, but we do have to understand locally whether we can or we cannot use these standards. But it is always a benchmark. I think when it comes to 5G, of course, Huawei, you know, with NISAs and GSMA, they definitely need to comply to international standards.
I just listening to what you said, Mohamed, there's another thing that I could give an anecdote. When I was in Middle East just recently, over the last few months, I visited, a number of the Middle Eastern countries, and the application of just coming to COVID specifically, but the equivalent of MyDIGITAL. If you're in Qatar, it's accepted. In Saudi, it's accepted. In Dubai, it's accepted. In Oman, if you have the Oman version, if you have the just as an example of country-based standard development of a product, yes, which is crossing the border of both government and consumers, has been accepted in a sort of a standard way, if I can put that. And that's sort of what you're suggesting here. How do we take whether there's a framework or a global standard, how do we apply it locally? What's important, what's not important? Right. But the other point I wanted to make about this example was that here's half a dozen GCC countries that trusted each other because they had the common target. And I think that's what you're trying to say, right? They have the common target. The common target in ASEAN is development of the digital economy, because it is, if we don't do that here in Asia, our families all suffer, right? The next generation. And that's why it's so important.
Can I perhaps just now, since you're talking about ASEAN digital economy, pose the next question to Sri Wat. And that is, how do you view the important role of the digital economy in promoting trade between ASEAN and other countries?
Yes, thank you very much, Tan Sri, for the interesting question. Just to quickly reflect on the previous discussion. I mean, it's very passionate. I love to hear it and to see what's happening. In terms of education background, I mean, I am a scientist by training, so I do respect standards, sticking to the formula and so on, but also having some academic experience. My recently pursued my thesis, right? My master's thesis in diplomacy was focusing on sovereignty and diplomacy in cyberspace. So just to humbly share what I've learned from that is that, the way that we have narratives on each other's from the international perspective, it does reflect on, how each nation is different in terms of culture, in terms of history. It affects how we see each other, no matter what standards we comply to. So as much as international standards are important, I also believe that, exchanging knowledge at the academic and scholarly level is important, because that reflects how we interact as nations. So in the terms of ASEAN digital economy and trade, digital trade and so on, it's not just about trade via digital platforms, but it's actually more sensitive on the topic of exchanging data information related to trade. So not just the goods, the products, but actually what is building up all of that in terms of the system. So I think from a regional perspective in ASEAN, it's clear that ASEAN is one of the most, if not the most dynamic economic region in the world, very tech savvy, very fast. The trade-off here is between convenience versus privacy, meaning that, of course, technology provides us with a lot of convenience, increased productivity, improved efficiency, but at the same time, the trade-off is with privacy. So how comfortable do we feel, like what the previous speakers mentioned, giving away our data? Are we willing for these private companies and tech giants around the world to steal our data without really saying it to us or saying it in a polite way? I think just reflecting on the Asian culture, we are very efficient people. So more often than not, we choose convenience over privacy. I don't have an answer, but definitely that's something to think of, that culture, history, narratives, I would say are equally important to following technical standards and international perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, what? I'd like to pose the next question to both Anwer and Dr. Sharlene. And do you think there are any main obstacles in the cooperation, in the digital economic cooperation between Malaysia and China? And if there are, how do you suggest that we can overcome any of these issues?
Doctor, please.
Yes, Anwer? Or Sharlene first?
That's a tough one, I think. Anwer, you better go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Tan Sri. Thank you, Charlene. Yeah, I put some thought into this. I think the two key things that we need to look into is trust. We need to build the trust, and I think that is what we are addressing today. The other main thing will be respect. Unfortunately, I think that is the lacking part. How do we get China to respect what is happening in the region? I'm talking about geopolitics. China being being a giant. How would China relate its relationship to countries like Malaysia, Philippines, and within this region? So when it comes to cybersecurity, there are a lot of things that I cannot share in public. And unfortunately, this is what I'm talking about. There must be some respect from state actors, that you do not compromise your neighbors, or you do not compromise anybody. And that is where I come back to Paris call, okay? Because when it comes to Paris call, they are looking at all these principles. So as a state, you do not attack another state, whether it is going to be on kinetic, like for example, what is happening between Russia and Ukraine. And likewise, a lot of these activities are already happening online. So I would definitely appreciate, if there is one point, if I'm stuck in a lift together with Xi Jinping, I would tell him, Mr. President, stop cyber attacks. Stop, okay? Because that is detrimental. That is basically where we are having problem with China. So yes, we need the trust, okay, fine. But at the same time, there must be that trust aspect, trust and respect, where we value you as a neighbor. I am not going to be throwing garbage to my neighbor's house. And likewise, being a Muslim, I would not want my neighbor's dog to come over to my part and, you know, do his business there. So I guess this is all about respect. So that is what I think. If I can have my 40 seconds with Xi Jinping, I'm going to tell him, Mr. President, you need to have respect for your neighbors. Charlene, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Sharlene.
I think I've mentioned it earlier that, you know, when countries, organizations talk about world dominance, I think this is when everyone gets a little bit shaky and just trying to understand where they fit into this entire, you know, ecosystem. And I think Anwer pointed that out as well, right? Respect but I would like to use the word, how can we have a win-win collaboration, not just on economy, but also on everything else, you know, around us. It has to be collaborative, not just for organizations, but for nations as well.
Yeah.
May I ask Paul to comment on this matter?
Terribly
You have
difficult.
a Malaysian
difficult.
family, you live in China, you may be
terrib-
able to
yes.
offer some perspectives.
All I can share with you the stories, you know, I can share with you the experiences of what I've seen as the changes, yes. And Anwer, you're 100% correct, as are you, Charlene. It's very difficult to say, do I spend 2% of my GDP on weapons? Or do I spend additional 2% of GDP on health or education in a country? Yes, these are, you know, some fundamental questions. But as you said, Charlene, global dominance and things like this that different countries are trying to impose on everybody else. I don't have an answer. You either put up your fists and fight, or you extend your hand in friendship and say, let's collaborate and do things. And that's why the collaboration part is so hard. And you can't collaborate because you don't have trust, and you can't have respect because there's no trust, right? The root cause is the bit of trust, right? Who says, well, you don't do if I don't do, well, who's going to do first, right? We all know this, right? It's a human nature. I feel, unfortunately, you know, it's human nature that we're all too greedy, perhaps. That's the fundamental problem, yes? But what I think in the last couple of years, there has been a momentum to try to shake the world up in the two areas of climate and also in health. There have been, yes? You have some very interesting things that have happened. The gentleman or the company, the research unit that developed and decoded the genome for breast cancer, they chose to publish it online in the hope that anybody would be able to provide cures, right? So that's pretty clear. You have the Gates Foundation trying to do a lot of things. Well, if it was a real philanthropic organization, then why is the design of the TerraPower inexpensive and intrinsically safe nuclear reactors not published on the internet for everybody to build them at cost as examples, you know? So we still have this geopolitical power play. We still have these commercial interests which are telling everybody, you know, meat is still a good product, or agriculture, you know, isn't going to save this, etc. We have all the solutions, we have all the money. So I don't have an answer for you, but what I can share with you about what I've seen in China, I'm not saying it's perfect or it's good or bad, but I can see a development. I can see their understanding of, look, I'll give you a very practical example. In February, March of when the first pandemic started, yes, March, I chose to go back to China, left my family here and I went back to China because it was safe. I think that's weird. But I chose to go there. And when I came out of quarantine, I can remember talking to my UK colleague and he said, how was it? And I said, well, you know, you come out, you scan a QR code, you punch in your details. He said, yes, we're having that debate now in Europe about data privacy. And I said, just a moment, Mark. They already have all the details of my passport. All they want to know is where do I work and where do I live? I'm happy to give the data because I want my family to be safe. I want my colleagues to be safe, right? So, you know, I don't know the answer between privacy and you know, and reality, but we do have to, you know, start trusting somebody, yep. And we tend to trust the government, right? Because that's why we elect them, right? But again, I come back down to the first component, which is education. And all I can do is share some stories, just as we all can. And I think it's our collective job in forums like this to share those so that as many people can start thinking about what really is important, because that's how we can make our voices heard at government level, etc., so that the right types of policies can be put in place and the right discussion between governments can be. I mean, you can still compete, but you can collaborate. And we need that for healthcare and we need that for the planet, right? We need those two things. I don't have, I can't tell you right or wrong, but I can tell you my feeling.
Thank you very much, Paul. We have about 7-8 minutes.
So if I could just add on, I mean, Sirawat made a very good point. It was something I had written down as well. The trade-off between convenience that we are looking, that we are gaining through digital.
Perhaps I would like each of you to take away. Am I okay now? Sorry about this interruption. I say we have about 7-8 minutes left. I'm going to ask each of you for a quick summary of your key takeaway points. Perhaps each of you can do so in just 1 or 2 minutes, starting with Anwer.
Sure. Thank you, Tan Sri. I'm going to end with, again, I think we need to look seriously into Paris call. I'm not sure what the Malaysian government stand is. Definitely, this is something that we need to discuss at higher level. The key point that I want to put forward is the Principle 9, where it talks about international norms. Okay, so we must promote the widespread acceptance and implementation of international norms for responsible behavior, as well as confidence building measures in cyberspace. So this is basically all about trust. We would not want people to use social media to mess around with the politics, like I would prefer candidate A to candidate B, and you have fake news and all that stuff. I think we have seen that happening, not just in Malaysia, but I guess in many other countries. How do we control fake news? And it is getting more difficult with the deep fake videos, technologies that are coming up. This is something that I think when it comes to issue of trust, it is critical. Being in Cybersecurity Malaysia, we roughly get about 800 to 1,000 incidents reported to us on monthly basis. And out of these 800 to 1,000 incidents reported to us, majority of them are financial fraud. People get cheated, people get scammed on internet. So it is not something that, I open my shop on the internet and tomorrow I see, millions of people coming in. No. You open your shop on the internet, chances are millions of malware and bots are going to be attacking you. So this is a serious issue. It is not something that, I guess to take it lightly, it must be taken in a very serious context. Okay. So
thank you.
Yeah, that is my say on that. Thank you, Tan Sri.
Thank you very much. Dr. Charlene, quick 1 minute.
Okay, my 4 key building blocks in building a sustainable economy, a global digital economy, would be technology alignment, business models, that has to be win-win, a collaborative mindset, and finally ecology, which talks about the broader scope of humanity in ensuring an economy survives. But lastly, the trade-off between convenience and privacy. And I think this is where, as individuals, organizations, countries, we need to draw the line. Where do we say sharing of information is required for convenience versus where it breaches a certain privacy norms? My 1 minute.
Thank you. Surivat?
So just to leave with an interesting statistic, 50% of Facebook's Messenger app, total voice message traffic comes from Cambodia. I'm sure you didn't know that. I didn't know that either until I read this article recently. That's just to show that Cambodians love to use voice message. It's not about Cambodia, it's about technology, and that sometimes technology has unintended functions, which in turn do benefit them a lot. So I think that in the context of cybersecurity, trust, and digital economy, before we start to point fingers and blame and make claims about certain countries back and forth, it's important to understand the local context and how these technology platforms really work there and why. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, final words from you?
Very simple. I think if we want to achieve a target, we have to agree the target together. So if you want to fix a problem, if you want to fix the planet, or you want to fix, anything, yes, it doesn't matter whether it's a cybersecurity issue or a policy, or whether it's a famine or anything like that. I think you have to pick a target, and then you have to, using the mindset change, how do we do it together? This is the bit about collaboration, okay? And that's, I think, Mohamed, Anwer, the key is, how to get the two governments to talk together. And you don't do this and I don't do that. It's, it's a bit like you don't attack me and I don't attack you. It's that sort of thing that you're saying, because we share a common vision that doing it differently will achieve that target, yes? But today we don't really, even during the pandemic, that wasn't the target, was it? Otherwise you wouldn't have millions of people in Europe dead and in the US and others. And in another country, you've only got a couple of thousand, just as an example. I'm not talking about political systems. I'm just saying if that's the target, yes? And I think we have enough common targets that we should do it. And I don't think that we really came to a conclusion in Glasgow, unfortunately, just as an example.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do not intend to summarize what we have discussed over the last 2 hours. There's so much rich information and knowledge that you have all shared, but perhaps some key words as a reminders as we leave this webinar. I think we've heard many times the words that have been spoken throughout the afternoon: collaboration, mindset change, standards, mutual respect, education, information sharing, and confidence building measures. I think these are some of the keywords that have been thrown up by our distinguished speakers that we should bear in mind as we chart the way forward. So let me just end by thanking all of you for being with us. Both Huawei and KSI are delighted to host this seminar. I wish to also thank the over 100 odd people who had joined us during the afternoon. So thank you for being with us, and hand over the floor now back to our MC, Zaim.
Thank you, Tan Sri, and thank you to the panel for such a engaging session. I've been in many KSI events. I've not seen a session this interesting in the sense of exchanges of views and points. And I think we didn't manage to cover all points, but I thought it was interesting. There were actually a number of interesting points in terms of from a public policy perspective. I thought one of the call to action by Mama Anwer was on the Paris call for Malaysia, especially to at least review this and see how we can reaffirm our support for an open, stable, and accessible and peaceful cyberspace. And I think that is a very interesting call to action, as well as the other speakers that have raised the issues in terms of making sure that we have a safe and secure cyberspace in Malaysia and also beyond in the region. And also many thanks to Sidiwat from Cambodia joining us, being the non-Malaysian, giving us such interesting perspective about Cambodia. I thought the panel unpacked so many questions, even more than I think what we intended to discuss in this afternoon. But thank you so much to the panel. And I want to do a little call to action for KSI. So if you enjoyed our session, this is not the only event that we do. Actually, we do many events. I want to call on folks that are listening, the 70 odd people right now, to go to kasi.asia, KASI.asia, and check out the events that we have. Actually, we have a number of upcoming events. If I can just share a few, we have the World Digital Economy and Technology Summit 2022, which will be held on 28 June 2022. And we have the World Women Economic and Business Summit in July 14. So these are two events, major events that we're organizing. So go on to our website, find out more about our events, and do join us, because we have many interesting events where you can find interesting content on public policy, technology, and everything in between. So until then, take care and stay safe, and hope to see you in the next KSI event.